Mind the Head is your weekly mental health and well-being show where I meet a variety of guests, some that are experts in their field and sometimes by guests that have overcome adversity and achieved personal challenges. Today's guest is Rose O'Driscoll, a psychic medium who, after attending a session herself, started on this particular chapter in her life. Her first group audience was in Buffalo, New York, and she's gone from strength to strength ever since. She's also a spiritual guidance counsellor, and using intuitive guidance can help you get onto the right path. And Rose joins me now. Hello, Rose.
Hey Paul, thanks for having me on the show.
Delighted to speak to you. You're very welcome along to the programme. So, like I said in the introduction, you are a psychic medium. I suppose the first question I got to ask you is, what is a psychic medium?
Yeah, so a psychic medium is, I suppose there's different kind of overview between a psychic and a medium, okay? So a medium itself, like myself, what I do is I connect with the energy of those that have passed on. So it is connection with the spirit world, okay? And then, of course, the psychic part is a person with a high level of intuition. So this could kind of help with intuitive guidance. Specifically on kind of foreseeing, we'll say, certain events or things that may come to fruition in a person's life, you know. But the mediumship part of it would be connection to those that have passed on into spirit world.
So I suppose you're something like a bit of a fortune teller as well. Is that
back in the old? Yeah, like I mean, back in the old day, the term like fortune teller would be used. But people would have had the belief like a fortune teller would say something that would be, you know, and it would be set in stone. But obviously, as the years went on, I would kind of class it as more using high intuition to kind of guide a person to use their own inner compass to kind of help them in their lives and what may be the best situation for them to do, you know. But yeah, a fortune teller would be kind of an older term for a psychic, so to speak. But then obviously a fortune teller wouldn't be like a medium or a clairvoyant, because there would be a difference with a person who can actually connect with spirit, you know.
And you've always had this gift.
Well, I suppose I class it more of an ability, you know, because like when I was a child, like, I mean, look, when we're all children, like we don't really understand things or we don't have an idea of it. So to me, it was perfectly normal that everybody had this ability to sense spirit, to see spirit, you know, to kind of have that gut instinct on events happening and things like that. So I would have been highly intuitive and connected to spirit as a young child. But like nobody would have actually kind of told me what it was, you know. Nobody would have helped me evolve on it or, you know, so a lot of the times, unfortunately, I wouldn't have necessarily shared experiences of what I've had because I felt that they may not necessarily have been understood, or I might have been ridiculed, or I might have been bullied for saying certain things or acting on certain things, you know.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I really find that really interesting, especially about the in trusting your intuition about things. I mean, is there any example you could give me maybe from when you were growing up about you using your intuition and how that worked for you?
Like, so I suppose my intuition grew sharper, like when I was definitely, like, we'll say, for example, small things, you know, like, we'll say, like, I got bullied, like, as a child and as a teenager. But sometimes, and it sounds funny, but I would be able to say to myself, oh, like a certain person may not be in school tomorrow, or, you know, a teacher might be out sick, or, you know, very random things.
Yeah.
And I found it like fun at the time because I was young and I was like, oh, that happened. And I felt that, you know. Yeah. So as the years grew on, it was almost like my friends would be asking me advice on like relationships or, you know, jobs or anything like that. And it just kind of came down to complete trust as well.
Yeah.
Because we all have intuition, you know, and that's what I kind of like in my job when I work with my clients, because I'd be telling people they need to start focusing on their own intuition, like that gut instinct about having a strong feeling about either, you know, quitting work, changing career, like moving house. You know, it's really all about focusing on that strong intuition as well, you know.
And even like about somebody, you mentioned relationships there, because sometimes we can have a gut feeling about somebody or being in a relationship with somebody we know is not right, but yet we don't listen to our intuition. We kind of just listen to our heart, I suppose, or our head, or whatever the case might be, but we don't trust what our intuition's telling us.
And you see, I mean, look, we're all human, myself included, you know, where, I mean, obviously the head and the heart, I mean, and the gut instinct, they do have a major role. So it can be very confusing to kind of really focus on that gut instinct. And that's, of course, where meditation might come in, or, you know, having a clear mindset. And a very good exercise I would kind of encourage people to do, if there's a thought, we'll say for argument's sake, about somebody moving house, and if your gut instinct is that excited about it, you know, that kind of goosebump feeling, that's your gut instinct telling you it's the right thing to do. But then it could be, like, unfortunately, like 5 minutes into that feeling, your head will start, oh, that might not work. And
yeah.
And that's where the conflict comes in between the intuition and practicalities, you know. So it does take a bit of practice to work on it.
So I did mention there about you going to your first psychic session, and this is kind of what got you started in the business, I suppose. Is that fair to say, the right word to use, in the business or in the industry?
Yeah, like, I mean, as I said, when I was kind of like 8, 10, that was my kind of first encounter with spirit as such, because when I was a child, I always had an elderly couple in spirit hovering over my bed, you know, and to me, it was more like maybe imaginary friends. I always felt like I was protected. I was never on my own. So I was fascinated with astrology. I was fascinated with the stars, the moons, everything, you know, anything, like, I suppose, different. That was my kind of
ask you about that couple. Did you ever, was that somebody from your life, from your family, or someone that had been deceased, or did you ever find out who?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be honest, I mean, I've kind of been working on a bit of a family tree as well. So I mean, in my own mind, they would have been my great grandparents. Like, I'd never physically met them when I was a child, but they would have been my great grandparents, you know, because I've gotten photographs and, you know, definitely the resemblance of them. So that's who it would have been, you know. And I was fascinated. Even when I discovered that, I was like, oh, but I wasn't necessarily shocked, because as I said, to me, it was just normal. It was like everybody could see this and everybody had spirit around them, you know?
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. So was that kind of your first, that was your first experience of the mediumship, perhaps?
I'll be honest, it's the one that stands out most strongly in my mind. You know, it's the one that kind of really stands out. I've no doubt that there's an abundance of encounters, but, you know, for me to actually keep them stored, I need an extra filing cabinet in my head, you know. But that would have been kind of the strongest memory for me as a child with spirit.
Yeah. So then I suppose, just to go on to when you went to your first psychic medium, maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'd say I think it was about age maybe 16, 17 at the time. And one of my friends, she was kind of very keen to go to this annual festival, a music festival in Mitchelstown in Cork. And she said, we'll put on the glad rags, we'll go out, we'll have a laugh, whatever. And as we were walking around, there was this caravan with the sign outside of psychic readings and fortune telling. But it was so strange, because the minute I seen it, it was like I was a kid in a candy store. I was like so excited, and I was like, oh, because I've never seen one before that point. And I went into the lady, and she was an older woman. But like the minute I walked in, it just felt like I was at home. It was like that warming aha moment. It's like, oh, I just felt like I belonged, if that makes sense. And she had like an abundance of like crystals, tarot cards, like astrology mats, you know, things that I wouldn't have, but I was fascinated with it. And she asked me to hold out my palm, which I did. And she went on about like what she was sensing around my friends at the time. And it was very accurate, you know. And she went into the relationship area, and now I was only 16, 17 at the time. And she told me that I would meet my future husband sooner rather than later. And at the time, I was kind of like, oh, okay, you know, and I took a grain of salt. But I wrote everything down in my diary that night after the reading, and I still have that diary today. But from that moment, it was like something just bursted through in me. It was like, okay, so it's not suppressing it anymore. I need to kind of learn about it, or I need to get myself educated on it, you know. From there, I suppose I would have went into the newsagents and purchased my first magazine. I think it was called Body, Mind, Spirit, Destiny or something at the time. And I'll always remember they had like a free deck of tarot cards with the magazine that time. So that was my first deck of tarot cards. And I just started kind of using them, working them for my own fun as well and with friends. But from that, it just kind of came stronger and stronger as the years went on. But it wasn't until really, I suppose, my early 20s, like I was uniform in society with insurance jobs, factory operator, like, you know, typically jobs that I would do. And then, of course, it was a case of I said to myself, okay, I'd just love to meet somebody in my early 20s just to get myself another reading. And I joined a Wise Woman Wednesday group where it was kind of like psychic development exercises. And it was a lady called Anne in Cork where she had given me a few exercises just to develop my own intuition. And I suppose it was kind of from that point then that I just said I needed to kind of branch into it further and further myself, you know. And I suppose it can be a bit of a long-winded story, but I'm trying to keep it as short as I can for you. But typically it was a case of, she said to me, she said, look, you've high intuition. And I felt that it was something that I wanted to do in my life, you know, because not only, like, I mean, with my own spirituality, it of course helped me with mental health issues throughout my life, dealing with certain trauma. I wouldn't be probably where I am today because of my spirituality, mindset, positive empowerment, my own self-study. So I just decided that I would kind of jump out and take that leap of faith and do it myself.
Yeah. And I suppose when that lady told you that you had a high intuition, I mean, up to that point, had you known that you had this high intuition, or, you know, was this something that she was just confirming for you?
No, I'll be honest, I kind of knew it because, as I said, like, I mean, there were certain things I was able to tell or foresee or even follow my own gut instinct on things, and it would happen. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as I grew older in my later teens and early 20s, I mean, there was some stuff, like, I couldn't explain it. So it was kind of niggling at me that I needed to kind of learn more about it. And, of course, she had given me an exercise that time, and I've always told this story, where she put a photograph into an envelope, and, you know, I didn't know it was on a photograph, but I literally wrote down what was on it, and then she showed it to me, which validated my own intuition as well, you know. But yeah, I suppose it was just more or less somebody validating it for me. Mm-hmm. And then for me, it was a case of, I'm either going to do it or I'm not. And then I decided to make that jump. And I'll always remember I set up a Facebook page. I wasn't comfortable kind of using my own picture, and I suppose that's just down to, you know, confidence and doubting myself. So I set up a Facebook page under the name Gemini Mizaki. Right. And it's very unusual, but Gemini being my star sign, and I love the Japanese language, and Mizaki was standing for blossom. So, you know, I used Gemini Mizaki for maybe, I'd say it was only a few months, and then I just changed it to use my own name, you know, just to get a feeler with clients and readings. And of course, when I went out there doing the readings, it just seemed to be something that fitted well, both with me and my clients. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
So can I ask you about when you're giving somebody a reading, about kind of, you know, you're saying that it's kind of, you're getting from the energy from that person. So how does that look like to you when you're doing the reading? I mean, is it like this kind of like, I don't know, you can describe maybe to me what it's like, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose just to clarify first, I suppose clients come to me for different reasons, okay? Yeah. So we'll say, for argument's sake, if a client came to me specifically looking to connect with a loved one that has passed, what happens is it's almost like spirit coming in, but giving me a daydream, okay? So they can come in, first of all, they'll present themselves as to who they are. So this could be a case of I might hear their name, I might see their name, I might see them clearly enough. And then, of course, they'll show me their illness of how they passed. So this would be validation. So this is proof that I'm connecting with them and who's coming forward. With that, of course, they would be telling me information about what's going on in the client's life. So it could be, we'll say with work, they might bring up straight away what needs to be discussed if there was a work change. And then along with that, with my own intuition, that's how I kind of relay the information to say the best possible scenario for the client. But 60% of it will be coming from spirit, I'll be honest. 60 to 70% of the information.
Because we tend to have this kind of, not obsession, but this real fascination with sort of connecting with the afterlife and with people that have gone and have left us. And I suppose part of it is to do maybe with unresolved grief, and that we haven't fully accepted that they've gone, and we want to believe that they are there, they're somewhere, that they can still communicate or talk to us.
Yeah. So I suppose it completely depends on the person's belief as well and where they're at in their own spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And what I would always say to a client is when they come to me, it's like me opening the gateway for them to help evolve themselves. So they could come to me for that breakthrough session of saying, okay, like I might say to them certain signs, I might say to them certain events that are happening, certain things that's going on, so they know the spirits are around them.
Yeah.
But then, of course, what I would encourage them to do is maybe if there is any challenges when it's coming to grief, maybe look into something like bereavement counselling along with the spirituality side of it to obviously help them on their journey. Because I'm only the messenger. It's like the internet, as I was saying to you earlier, about being the router of information, but I mean, understandably, the grieving process is quite complex. It is a healing journey. There's no time limit on it. So if it's a case of that, I would recommend maybe something like bereavement counselling or something just after kind of a gateway session to say, look, this is your signs, to help them evolve as well.
And sometimes then if someone does come to you, that there may not always be a resolution, or there may not always be a communication with somebody. It doesn't always work. A bit like the internet doesn't always work.
Yeah, like I suppose what I always say to clients when they come to me for a session, specifically looking into the mediumship connection, I would say I can't guarantee connection with any one given spirit that may come forward. And the idea behind that is because it's not like a photographer. You can ring them up and book them in, for a certain time. And sometimes what I find at the beginning of the session, it's the strongest connection. So it may be somebody that they wouldn't have expected to come through in the session that may come through first. And then as the session comes along, whoever they're keen to connect with, they might come through as the session goes along. Then, of course, you have very strong connections. They can come in straight away, no problem. But then, as I always say to clients, if they don't connect in a session, it's not that they're not there. It could be that the client is connecting with them strongly themselves and they don't need a messenger or a medium to relay the information to them.
Okay. Oh, wow. I've never heard of that before. I never heard of that particular part of it. Yeah. Can I ask you about yourself then, Rose? Because, I mean, when you're doing this work and you're speaking to people that have lost people and there's a lot of grief and a lot of emotion, do you find then that kind of maybe affects you as well, and that after a period that you may need to kind of just take a little break from that to kind of just recharge yourself and just kind of look after your own kind of well-being? Because that's quite, listening to those stories from people, and it can be quite, even for someone that isn't a psychic medium, can be very emotional. But so I can't imagine for you, when you're kind of having to be face to face with people dealing with this, it can't be easy at times.
Yeah, and you see, that's all about kind of my own routine, because unfortunately there's such traumatic events out there. Obviously, I've had my own kind of challenging journey in life as well. So there could be situations where clients could come to me, but that, of course, could trigger my own personal stuff and trauma. So, I do have my own, I suppose, routine in place. So it would be a case of I could only take on a certain amount of clients. I would have to look after my own mental health well-being. I might have to, we'll say, as I always say to my friends, sometimes I might hibernate, for a day or two. I might come off social media. I have to, but that's just me, as you saying, recharging, because it is a case of, and I suppose, cutting off the energy as well. So because in one session, I'm giving most of my energy to that client, because that's what a session is about, putting the client first. And then after that, it's about me kind of saying, okay, what routine do I need to do to kind of build my own energy back up?
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose it's like anything. It's like any job, really. If you kind of overwork, or if you burn yourself out, or if you don't have rest or recuperation, it will affect you,
Because especially when you're dealing with grief, because people will have lots of kind of questions that they'll be looking to you, but not necessarily to you, but for what you're doing to answer the questions and to kind of resolve some of the issues that maybe have been there before the person died, or whatever the case might be. So there's quite a lot of pressure there being put on you, not directly, but just, if you know what I mean. Expectations are quite high for you to kind of answer all the questions and solve all the problems.
Yeah. And I suppose at times, and I suppose I give this example, and I suppose I don't want to be kind of triggering anybody as such, but specifically if there was a passenger to suicide, you can imagine there'd be a lot of unresolved questions. And sometimes, I mean, I will not have all the answers. And most of the times, even like spirit, they won't have the answers either. But what I would always recommend to clients, there's this stage of, sometimes in life, you'll never get the answers that you want. And you could go around in circles and circles and circles, carrying that weight and heaviness in your heart, but it won't help you move forward in your life. Where it comes to a stage of maybe acceptance, and focusing on how to heal that guilt. And of course, that's with the bereavement counselling and counselling journey as well. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I'm not going to have all the answers at times, as much as I'd love to have 100% answers for people at times. I mean, sometimes that doesn't happen. That's just me being very honest.
Now, you've done kind of a few group events, haven't you?
Yes. So I've done a few shows. I've a few planned now again for this year, but there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, so we haven't kind of too much advertised or anything like that yet. The group show events with audiences, I like that because it does help people evolve and learn about the whole experience of it as well.
Yeah.
So even at times, if people aren't really, I suppose, if they don't understand what it's about, the show event, it's a very good opportunity to help people educate themselves and learn more about it.
What exactly happens at kind of one of your shows? So one
of the group shows, it could be, we'll say up to 50 people in an audience, okay? And not every one of those people are going to get a reading, but basically spirit can come in, okay? And I'll be drawn to whoever is sitting in the audience as to where that spirit will want to relay the message. Now, it won't be a full reading, but it could be a snippet of who's coming forward. It could be, they might say their name, how they passed, who they're watching over in the family, if there was anything going on, if there was somebody getting married, if there was an addition to the family, if there was, any changes. It could be like maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just like a snippet is what I call it. And then, of course, that spirit will come and go, and then I could move on to somebody else.
So when you're standing on the stage looking out across the audience, is there like this invisible light kind of shining over the person that you're looking for, or how do you know?
Not necessarily. It's more like a pull, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's more energetically of a pull, like I need to go over to my left, or I need to go to this person. It's like a draw, you know. And then of course, then as the closer I get to that client and the connection is coming in more strongly, then of course, as I said, it could vary from seeing them, hearing them, sensing their illness and things like that, but it's more like a pull or a draw, to be honest.
Now, I did mention there that your first audience was in Buffalo, New York. So in comparison to America, Irish audiences, are they different to the American audience?
I'll be honest, to me, I feel, and I suppose obviously it's like anything, when you're out in your own hometown, your own home country, you yourself is going to be different as a person anyway, but for me, I mean, I definitely felt that there was more, I suppose, awareness in America at that time, because sometimes people may not necessarily, like, sometimes people would have had the experience in Ireland, the group show, where they might be fearful of somebody hearing all their information or hearing their life story, or they might be very reserved. But that's just down to the individual, and that's fine. Whereas the show in Buffalo, I mean, it was a very uplifting experience because it was my first time. I mean, obviously I was very nervous, but it worked really well because people were very open at that time.
Yeah.
And of course, when there's that open energy, of course you're going to be inviting spirit in, and it makes it more free flowing. I mean, the pressure isn't going to be on the clients, anybody in the audience, or myself. It just makes it that bit easier to be more open-minded, but yeah, it was a really positive experience. I vividly remember connecting with a fireman that had passed in New York at that time, and I was connecting with a family member for him, and he was telling me of exactly what happened and stuff, and of course obviously that helped them on their healing journey as well moving forward.
Yeah. I was going to ask you what was your first night on the stage like? I mean, obviously you said you were nervous, but I mean, were you kind of nervous with excitement, or was it, what was going through your head?
You see, I would have, I've had anxiety throughout my life, and of course it could be a case of it could trigger on occasions. So I mean, when I was younger, I mean, there was times where I used to lock myself inside in the bathroom cubicle because I was too anxious to go out into classroom to be in front of people.
Yeah.
So for me to go from that to what I'm after doing, it is like, so yeah, I mean, I'll always remember before I went out, I'd be inside in the bathroom, like trying to take my deep breaths, try not to have a panic attack, trying to get myself grounded. And there is times to this day that I would still have that anxiety, but it's just about me learning how to manage it and do my own rituals to control that as well.
Would you have any advice for anyone that's kind of suffering from similar?
Yeah, like for me personally, I would find like grounding exercises very, very beneficial. Or if you find yourself getting into that rabbit hole of negative thoughts, maybe have a shower or divert your energy, maybe just put on music or boil the kettle, have a cup of tea, or stand outside for fresh air for 5 minutes, message a friend, divert the energy of the mindset. I think and it could be something so small, like picking up the phone, washing your hair, just to try to switch that energy to get yourself out of that state,
Yeah. On a day-to-day basis, we'll say if you weren't meeting a client, do you ever get kind of, messages coming through or anything like that? You know what I mean?
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, most of the times, like, if I would say have a day of clients, that morning, I could have a spirit with me for maybe an hour beforehand. Or, I'd have somebody that would come in even maybe an evening beforehand, talking to me, telling me what's going on. So I'd know exactly who they would be connected to, So yeah, they could come in even like before the session or even the time a person books a reading. I could have that spirit coming in every so often until that session happens.
You seem so at ease with that, whereas I'm kind of here going, you've got these strangers kind of coming into your life and everything, and yet you're just so comfortable with that, and that's just the way it is, and that's it.
It is, because I mean, as I said, it's something that I've had since I was born.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's not a case of like when I was 10 or 12, it started happening. It's been there all the time. And it's like, even if you think about it, it's like a language to a child. If they're speaking English all their life, it's normal.
Yeah.
If they start learning something different, of course, it's going to be abnormal or strange or, but it's not to me. It's just, as I said, I would have been under the illusion when I was a child, everybody seemed to have had it.
Yeah.
But then when I learned they didn't, I was like, oh, okay,
I want to ask you about skepticism, because I'm sure you've encountered this from kind of time to time. And, I mean, everyone's entitled to their own beliefs. That's life. But like, how do you respond to that?
Yeah. Like, I'll be honest, I actually have a very high tolerance level for skepticism, because any skeptic they're willing to learn about the subject matter. Okay. So yes, they're kind of questioning it, but at the same time, they're getting curious about it. And I've had a lot of clients that came to me, be it husbands, wives, partners, family, friends, and they'd say, look, I don't know why I'm here, but it was recommended I came here. I don't believe in this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, after a session, they thanked me. They kind of said, you're after shedding some light in certain situations, so I helped them evolve, which is fine. Same as group audience shows. I've had skeptics there as well. But again, they learned on the matter. A cynical person is going to be a person where they're straight down, like nothing is like factual. So they're not going to believe at all. And that could be similar in everyday events. And if that's the case, that's fine. I don't hold any grudges against skeptics or cynics. Everybody's entitled to their own belief and their opinion. And I'm not a preacher to say this is right and that is wrong. But yeah, I'd have a high level of tolerance for skeptics, I'll be honest, because I applaud them, because I was a skeptic myself. Even when I went into this line of work, like, there were certain things that I'd pick up on, and I'd be saying to himself, like, how do I know that? I'd still question it, even to this day. I would still question, like, some things that I pick up on, I'd find amazing. I'm like, well, how did I know that? So it's fine, it's just the way it is.
So even if you had like a skeptic in the audience, they're not going to block the energy coming through, are they? With their kind of
no, not for everybody else. What I find interesting though, sometimes spirit give me a hard time, because sometimes spirit will come in the strongest ones for the skeptic. so they'd be the ones that I might be drawn to first, and I'm like, oh. But as time goes on, I mean, it's fine. I'm still doing my job. I know that I'm getting information from spirit. It's up to me to interpret the information I'm getting from spirit, because spirit's information will always be correct. And then, of course, that person is going to learn and evolve either way. So, I mean, it is all about helping people evolve and get themselves educated as well.
Is there any kind of funny stories from, when you've done maybe group shows, for example, where maybe somebody has said something that's, been really, really funny, or like a really funny story?
Oh, there's so many of them. No, that's okay, but there's just so many of them. And I think as well, because, and I suppose going back to what you would ask me about my own energy, I mean, that's about me cutting off the energy. So that's why I don't remember specific stories as such. And that's me not being disrespectful. It's just me cutting off the energy so I don't carry it,
Yeah.
I suppose there's a lot of funny situations in general, but I can't really pinpoint one for you today.
That's all right.
Unfortunately, nothing kind of stands out, that I can specifically remember, because they've all been unique, magical moments.
Yeah.
There might have been a situation with a family member, all right, where something came up. I wouldn't want to say it was too personal, but like there might have been like a few people that were questioning that family member after, but they just thought it was funny that it came up,
Yeah.
But no specifics on it really as such.
Because there's no real filter on what you say then on the stage, is there? Because you're just saying what they're telling you, and that mightn't, be something that the person wants to hear in the audience, Yeah.
And that's it, because, I mean, it is down to trust. And as I said to myself, when I go into this work, I have to trust what spirit is saying to me, as random as what it is. Like, it could be something down to anything, but if I had to question it logically, I mean, I wouldn't be giving the information to the client, so I don't really question what I get from spirit. I just kind of say what I get. And there has been so many different random stories.
Yeah.
It could be anything from like talking about bulls on farms, like with a broken leg, or it could be, anything. But if I have to sit and question that, I'm not going to be doing my job right. So I literally I say it as it is, it's how I get it, and that's the best way to do it, isn't it?
That's it. So when you come off stage after a group event like that, what do you do to kind of, I suppose, unwind, or just maybe, take it down a level?
Yeah, and I suppose, like, especially if a group event is happening at an evening time, it is like something so simple, like it could be just, I know it sounds funny, but even like just having a nice warm shower and getting into your pajamas and just going to bed, like day events, sometimes if I have a lot of clients in day individual readings, what I find, like a walk outside just to clear the head, or have a good dinner, or, a disconnect, or even sometimes you might have to do housework, you might just have to turn on the loud music, anything to just do that. And then of course meditation would be a big thing as well.
Yeah, because that brings us on nicely now to talk about your intuitive guidance that you also do on a one-on-one basis with people. So I suppose maybe someone that would come to you, will be looking for maybe some help to kind of, I suppose not necessarily change their life, but I suppose maybe get their life going in a different direction, or moving direction, or something like that. Yeah. So a lot of the times clients could come to me and they could say, look, I just feel like the energy is so scattered. I feel like I'm at a crossroads. That's typically a word that would be used quite common. And they mightn't even know like why they're getting a reading. So like my own intuition, I would focus
specifically in work, career, finances, family, health, any energy blocks. I've had a lot of clients actually in the last 2 weeks, they were setting up their own businesses, but they had that fear of failure. So I was trying to work with them and trying to get affirmations to kind of get out of that paralyzed state of fear to make that jump, Then you could have people that might be unhappy with their home living, they're contemplating on immigrating, and we go through the different scenarios of what will be the best situation for them. And of course, then as I always say to people, it is guidance. I can tell you what I can kind of see as the best situation, but it's up to the client to take that on board and kind of act on it in their own life as well.
You mentioned energy blocks there, and can I ask you what's an energy block?
So an energy block would typically be if you're feeling a bit tired, sluggish, like stuck in a rut, and if you're yearning for change, like if and I know we might be talking about career, but if somebody is kind of sick of the same mundane thing, like Groundhog Day, or and they have all these ideas, be it to write a book or to write a song or to change job, but they don't know how to get to that stage. So that would be an energy block of, we'll say it could be fear, it could be lack of confidence, it could be self-esteem, it could be doubt, it could be. So once we kind of pull that out by the root in the session, then they're aware of what they need to work on. So that could be through like meditation, affirmations, law of attraction, positivity, things like that.
And that's all linked then back to energy as well, isn't it?
Sure, of course. Yeah. And that's what I say. It's all about trying to kind of get into the more positive mindset to kind of keep energy flowing in your life rather than to be kind of stuck and stagnant.
Yeah. How have you found over the last couple of years, you've kind of had more people kind of come to you wanting to change and...
Oh, I'll be honest, I'm very blessed to have met so many clients to date, but to me, it feels like that people, like in society in general, are evolving at a fast pace. So mindfulness and being more open-minded, society is changing, and of course the world is changing, where we're all kind of looking more for the positive side of things rather than the negative. So people will start to look for that. So I do find my client base is expanding, so to speak, And
not just like females either, I'd imagine. I suppose there are some men that come to see you as well.
Oh, of course, yeah, it varies, like men, women. It could be students like in their 20s. It could be age up to 50. It varies from a day-to-day basis,
And the best way, I suppose, to get in contact with you to do any of that would it be through your website or through your Instagram?
Yeah, so I have a website which is roseodriscoll.com, and then of course we have our social media pages on Instagram, which is Rose O'Driscoll, and Facebook, which is Rose O'Driscoll as well. And they'd be kind of, but the website is kind of mostly the booking area, where people can book in.
I kind of have one more question to ask you, Rose, about. When people come through, like what's been the kind of furthest back in time that maybe you've gone? You were talking about your great grandparents.
That is a very good question, because sometimes people, I can only talk in my experience. I've had a client come to me where I connected with her uncle that would have passed 2 days beforehand. So she had thought it was very soon. That connection was very strong. And then, of course, I've had connection with people that would have passed in 50s, the 1940s, 20s, 50s. But what I would always kind of say as well, it depends on the client's needs, So what I find is if somebody would come forward, be it a grandfather, that the client wouldn't have necessarily been, they may not necessarily have even met them. And that gentleman would come forward. They might question why they're coming forward, but it could just be to say apologizing for family tension or apologizing that they could have done more in the family. They always have a reason to come forward with a message. But yeah, it could be anything back to 1920s, 30s, 40s, I'll be honest.
And would you know necessarily that they were coming from that particular era to start with? They don't say to you, I'm Paul from 1920 or I'm Paul from 1940. They don't introduce themselves as that.
It's more I would go on generations through family.
Yeah.
So the way they come forward is and I know it sounds funny, but it could be if it's on the left side or the right side. That's how I know it's female or male. And then I work on generations, so they could pull me back 3 generations, or they could pull me back like 2 generations where I know it's a grandparent, or then they'll show me a generation below, which I know is an uncle or an aunt or a parent. So it can be, that's the way I work it, you know. Yeah. But then, of course, they could give me the month that they passed, and sometimes they will give me the year that they passed, just to validate that I am connecting with them.
Yeah. And when you hear, for example, the 1920s, I mean, that's you know, that's incredible, like, to think that someone from that particular period in time is communicating through you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose it is, but at the same time, I know this might sound strange, but it's the information that's coming through from for the client.
Yeah.
So when I'm tuning in, it's just basically what they want to say to the client. It's not as if I can kind of pull them inside and say, hey, what's it like back there?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Unfortunately. But you know, it's basically like what's coming through, what the client needs to hear from that person. It could be if they're doing a family tree, it could be anything to do with family information, you know. But yeah, it is, you know, and I find it, sometimes they'll show me fashion. Like I could see unusual clothes they're wearing. I could see unusual hats they're wearing.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it can be very interesting in each session, you know.
You mentioned kind of family trees there. So if people are kind of making family trees and they kind of want to maybe find out more about their history of their family, would you kind of recommend going to see a psychic medium to kind of help with that?
I'll be honest, I can't say yes or no, really. It is down to the client, you know, because as I said, sometimes we don't have all the answers, and that's just me being brutally honest.
Yeah.
I feel like if somebody kind of feels like it's something that they might look into, I mean, by all means, you know, go for it. But yeah, sometimes it has. I have worked with 3 families. One family is in Wisconsin in the States, where they discovered a half-brother, you know. I've had another family, there has been more kind of discoveries through information that I've brought up as well. Yeah. So it has been successful, you know, in certain areas. And then, of course, you could be giving information to people. They may not necessarily resonate with it today because that information hasn't come in yet, you know, but they'll just take the information on board and maybe do their own research on that as well.
So one of my last questions, Rose, to you is, do you think that inside all of us there's a little bit of psychicness as well?
Oh, completely. 100%. That is intuition. Like, as if I would say to anybody, if you have that feeling on something, another good example would be if you were, say, just on a day-to-day activity and maybe a friend popped into your head, or, you know, if you just randomly started thinking about somebody, that's your gut instinct and intuition, maybe to reach out to them. They might be going through a challenging time, or you might feel the need to kind of just make that phone call, you know, and that is the level of intuition. Every one of us has intuition, but it is like a muscle, you know, unless you develop that through trust and opening it up, that's when it gets quite sharp.
Because I've had that where I've been talking about somebody, all good, of course, and next thing, the person has either, you know, I bumped into them on the street, or unless I've met them somewhere, and it's just like, oh, wow, I was just talking about you, you know. You know. Yeah,
there you go. That's your intuition. And it all connects, you know. And you'll probably find it fascinating, like when you're aware of that scenario or when you're aware of that happening, that's you opening up your intuition as well. So your intuition will get sharper as the days goes on.
Yeah. And you would always say, Rose, always to trust your intuition, no matter whether it's good or bad.
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, sometimes we all, like, we'd have that bad feeling on things as well, you know. Or if somebody said, oh, I don't want to go on that night out, or I don't want to meet that person, you really just need to tune in and follow your own gut instinct as well, you know. Same as dreams, you know, a lot of us have very vivid dreams. And I would encourage people to journal them or take them down, or, you know, because that's your intuition kind of telling you what's going on in your own life as well.
Fantastic. Rose, I have found this conversation so interesting today with you. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I've learned quite a lot about the psychic medium.
Great. Yeah. And I mean, I'm delighted because that's what it's all about. It's about whatever about curiosity. And I mean, it's about you kind of touching into a subject matter that you might be interested in or to learn more about. And it's about you and your evolving on your own journey of this life, isn't it? And trying to just make the most of it. That's all any of us can do. Exactly.
As we said, Rose, your website is roseodriscoll.com. And then you've also got your Instagram, which is Rose O'Driscoll.
Just Rose O'Driscoll, yeah. And say as Facebook is Rose O'Driscoll as well. I often do kind of, maybe I have a lot of positivity there. I might have energy updates for the week. I might have tarot cards for the days, so feel free to pop over and follow. It's a nice page, good community, nice positive community as well.
Great. Rose, thank you so much. A pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
It's been brilliant. Thanks, Paul.
And that's it for today's episode of Mind the Head here on Loughrea Community Radio. I'll be back with you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mind the Head with Paul Flaherty, a weekly show that focuses on mental health and well-being, Sundays on Loughrea Community Radio.